The morning Margaret Chen drove her silver sedan off Highway 42 started like any other Thursday in late September. She was running numbers in her head about the quarterly earnings report when her tire caught the soft shoulder. The car lurched sideways and plunged down the embankment toward Miller's Creek. Cold water rushed through the door seams as the vehicle settled into the shallow river. Margaret's hands shook on the steering wheel. At 58 years old, she had survived 2 decades building her manufacturing company from nothing, but she had never felt this kind of raw fear. Through the cracked windshield she saw him. A man in faded jeans and a work shirt was already wading toward her against the current. His weathered face showed concern, not hesitation. "Can you unlock the door?" His voice carried calm authority over the sound of rushing water. Margaret's fingers fumbled with the lock. The door wouldn't budge against the water pressure. The man named Thomas Whitmore didn't waste time talking. He braced himself against a river stone and pulled with both hands until the door groaned open. "Take my hand," he said, "one step at a time." The water soaked through her wool suit as he guided her over the slippery rocks. His grip was steady and strong. When they reached the muddy bank, Margaret collapsed onto the grass, shivering uncontrollably. Thomas pulled off his flannel jacket and wrapped it around her shoulders without a word. It smelled like wood smoke and autumn air. He sat down beside her, giving her space but staying close enough to help if needed. "You're safe now," he said quietly. Margaret looked at this stranger who had jumped into a river for her without thinking twice. His hair was graying at the temples, and his hands showed years of hard work. There was something about his presence that felt like shelter itself. "I need to call someone," she said through chattering teeth. Her phone was somewhere in the submerged car, along with her briefcase and her carefully constructed armor of success. "My truck's just up the road," Thomas said. "Let's get you warm first. Everything else can wait." She wanted to argue that she had meetings and obligations. Instead, she found herself following him up the slope to an old blue pickup truck that had seen better decades. Thomas turned the heat on full blast and handed her a thermos of coffee from his dashboard. "It's black. I don't carry cream and sugar, but it's hot." The bitter warmth spread through her chest as she drank. They sat in comfortable silence while her shivering gradually subsided. Through the windshield, she could see her car sitting in the creek like a monument to how quickly everything could change. "I'm Margaret," she finally said. "Thomas. Tom to most folks." He glanced at her with kind gray eyes. "You hurt anywhere besides your pride?" That pulled an unexpected laugh from her. "Is it that obvious? I've had my share of days that knocked me flat," he said. "The trick is getting back up." Something about his tone suggested he knew what he was talking about. Margaret studied his profile as he watched the river. There was a sadness around his eyes that spoke of loss she recognized because she carried her own. "I should call a tow truck," she said. "And probably the police." "Already done," Thomas said. "Called them while you were catching your breath. They'll be here shortly." He paused, then added almost shyly, "I run a small furniture workshop about 2 miles from here. If you need a place to wait where it's warmer and there's a bathroom, you're welcome to come along." Margaret knew she should call her assistant and arrange for someone from the office to collect her. She should be worrying about the board meeting tomorrow and the contract negotiations on Friday. Instead, she heard herself say yes, "Thank you." Thomas's workshop was a converted barn filled with the sweet smell of sawdust and wood oil. Half-finished chairs and tables in various stages of creation lined the walls. Sunlight streamed through high windows onto workbenches worn smooth by years of use. "It's beautiful," Margaret said, and meant it. There was an honesty to this space that her sleek corner office lacked. "It's home," Thomas said simply. He showed her to a small bathroom where she could clean up and change into the spare work clothes he kept for messy projects. When she emerged wearing his oversized sweatshirt and rolled-up jeans, he had hot tea waiting and a wool blanket draped over the chair by his space heater. They talked as the afternoon light shifted across the workshop floor. Thomas told her about learning woodworking from his grandfather and raising his daughter Emma alone after his wife passed 12 years ago. Emma was 26 now and teaching art in Portland, but the house still felt too quiet. Margaret found herself sharing things she never discussed at board meetings, how she built her company as a single mother after her husband left when their son was 3, how that son was 32 now, and they spoke maybe once a month in careful, polite conversations that never touched anything real. How success had cost her things she was only now realizing she missed. "Do you ever regret it?" Thomas asked. "The path you chose?" "Every day and never," Margaret said honestly. "Does that make sense?" He smiled. "More than you know. The police came and went. The tow truck hauled her car away. Margaret's assistant arranged for a hotel room and fresh clothes to be delivered. But as evening approached, she found herself reluctant to leave the warm circle of light in Thomas's workshop. "I should let you get home," she said without moving. Thomas was running his hand over a table he'd been building when she arrived. His fingers traced the grain with unconscious tenderness. "Can I ask you something that might be too forward?" His voice was quiet. "After you pulled me from a river, I think forward is relative." He looked at her then with an intensity that made her breath catch. "If I asked you to stay for dinner, if I asked you to sit at my table and let me cook for you, if I stripped away all the distance and politeness and just asked you honestly for your company, would you stay?" The question hung in the air between them, weighted with meaning beyond simple hospitality. Margaret understood he was asking something deeper. Would she stay if he showed her who he really was? Would she let herself be seen in return? She thought about her empty house and her carefully scheduled life. She thought about how long it had been since anyone had asked her to stay just for herself, not for what she could do or decide or provide. "Yes," Margaret said, "I'd stay." Thomas smiled and it transformed his whole face. "Then let me put these tools away and we'll figure out what's in my kitchen." As she watched him move around the workshop, tiging his workspace with practiced efficiency, Margaret realized this was what she'd been missing. Not romance necessarily, though there was something stirring in her chest she hadn't felt in years. But this simple, authentic connection. Two people who'd lived long enough to know what mattered, choosing to be present with each other. The river had swept her off her planned course that morning. But maybe she thought, standing in the golden light of Thomas's barn, maybe that's exactly what needed to happen. Sometimes you have to lose your footing to find your way home. If this story touched your heart, please like, share, and subscribe. Leave a comment telling me about a moment when an unexpected kindness changed your day. I love hearing your stories.